Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Lilith. I do always advise you to explore the rest of the floor first before you actually go to the boss room, and I do that for various reasons. I think that's a good idea because, first of all, you might find something like a Perto rune, and if there's a Devil Deal, you would usually want to use it on that. And of course, if you don't explore it first, that means you can't find the Perto rune, and you have to have it because the Devil Deal usually only appears once or twice when you exit the boss room. But I don't think that's very necessary on the first floor. I think it's almost a good idea to go to the boss room first as soon as you find it, especially with a character which has an active item, like in this case Lilith. I think using the optimal or using your box of friends optimal is very important because it's gonna kind of set the precedence as how often you use it, and it's definitely one of those items, I say this all the time, that you really don't want to use it too often, but at the same time you don't just want to leave it hanging at full charge, because in that case you're not really getting the use out of your item. So in this case I would say on the first floor it's always a good idea to go to the boss room first. If you happen to find it, use your active item because you will also get another item out of it, and because maybe that item is a stat upgrade, you can use that item to clear the rest of the floor faster. And also, like I said, you're gonna have your active item which you can use on the rest or maybe on the second floor, and it just kind of work out better in that sense. There's always something that happens in Isaac that kind of gets me off guard. I always had this idea that Isaac was this progressive game where you just get stronger as the run goes on, and there certainly are runs like that, but so often than not, or at least more often than not in Afterbirth Plus, and again, this might be just variance, but it might just be something going on. But in this case I feel like the devil or the run is really preceded by one good devil deal, or maybe one good item, or maybe one combination of items that you get kind of really sets you up for a good path. And in this case it was exactly the same. In this we got the devil deal on the second floor like we usually do. It was very close to us not getting it just because it was kind of a tricky boss, but still we did get it, and it contains three really good items. We got a Sacrificial Dagger, we got Mom's Knife, and we got Abaddon. And all of those items are great on their own, but what's really kind of bothers me about it is that this was basically the only way I saw in this run to actually make it work. If we didn't pick up those three items, or maybe Mom's Knife in particular, our run would actually be terrible. Like, besides these three items, we really didn't get any consistent DPS upgrades later on. Cambion Conception paid with Succubus, and that's pretty good, but that's not really us getting a particular item which made us stronger. That just basically us getting hit enough times to actually trigger Cambion Conception. And I've seen, or at least I feel like this is happening more and more lately, and again, I'm not sure why that is, it's just that I feel like some people find a certain combination of items. I'm glad at least it's on the second floor, because that means that everybody will find it, at least if you play well enough, and if you don't play well enough, you're gonna be kind of penalized for this, and in this case I think it's okay, but there definitely are other instances where maybe someone finds a golden chest, opens a golden chest, maybe takes a risky sacrificial room, and in this case, they get something out of it which just defines the whole run. And I really feel like this is something that's started happening in Afterbirth Plus, but again, I really have no concrete evidence or maybe statistical analysis to support my claims, but maybe it's just an observation that I had. With that said, a Mom's Knife on Lilith isn't that good. I would usually advise against it. No, I wouldn't advise against it because obviously Mom's Knife is still a very good item, but if you compare its usefulness to the other characters, it's just so much worse, because first of all, the Mom's Knife is actually much smaller, which means it's already harder to hit just because it has a smaller hitbox. But also, because of how Incubus works, it kind of lags behind, and you really do get the most distance on Mom's Knife by the velocity as you're actually traveling. And usually it's pretty easy because you can tie the velocity of your character to how you move him. So when you press the button to go to the right, usually your character is gonna go to the right as well. But with Incubus, it's not necessarily true every time, because what might happen is that sure you might go right, but because your Incubus is lagging behind, that means it's not gonna have as much velocity as you thought it would, or maybe just going in a weird direction, or it's just much harder to hit. And what's even worse is that you don't really have that much range on it, as opposed to if you had it like on a normal character. But in this case, because we had a very high shot speed, thankfully, and our range was still decent, our knife was actually traveling pretty fast. Because most of the damage on Mom's Knife actually comes from that arc at the end, so when you stick it to an enemy, and basically because the Mom's Knife ticks so fast, it deals a lot of damage the longer the knife stays on the enemy, so that's why it's good to kind of peek it at the arc of when it goes out and it comes back, basically. But in case of Mom's Knife, or at least with Incubus, you really can't account for that, and especially with the higher shot speed, I believe at least that the Mom's Knife goes out and comes back much faster, and it kind of makes it a bit tricky, but still, it's an item that defined this run. It actually made it possible to beat this. Of course, with Mom's no, not Moms, but Box of Friends, boss rush is never too hard, especially when you have 7 incubuses wielding knives just destroying everything. And you can see that even with 7.0 damage, which is just twice above the base damage, we're still actually dealing a very decent amount of damage, and that's just because Mom's Knife is such a good item in this case. And like I said, you can imagine if you didn't have it in this case, this run would actually be pretty bad. And not only bad, because of our very high shot speed, we would be knocking enemies around just so fast, and with Incubus it just becomes impossible to hit, and it would be a mess. But with Mom's Knife, thankfully, the synergy, or at least the items that we got, were kind of well together, and we were actually able to make it work. One thing I'm kind of disappointed about was the Mom's Eye, I believe it is, and essentially the one that puts a knife at the back of your head. And usually that works with the character, but I really thought it was gonna work on Lilith, and I really had no theory as to why it would work, because obviously Lilith can shoot. But I really thought that it's a synergy that would put another knife on top of us, and because we already had the transformation, the Mom's transformation, which gave us a knife, I really thought it would be a good combo to kind of have an additional knife following us around, and we could deal some damage with that. Sadly, it doesn't work like that, and I'm really, again, unhappy with how unsynergistic Lilith can be sometimes. Early on, we got a D4, or at least in the treasure room there was a D4, and I did debate it whether I should pick it up or not. And obviously, I think if you're going for a win, if you really want a really strong run, you would pick that up and eventually would get it. But I think that Lilith suffers from a very similar problem like Azazel does, and that just, even if you pick up a D4, you're just gonna reroll many times, and there are just so many items which don't necessarily synergize with what's going on, and you just really don't want to avoid them, or maybe you don't want to pick them up. Eventually, you're gonna get a very good run, and it's just gonna melt ass, and you're gonna be able to actually kill all of the enemies in the room. But with just how many rolls it would take, I don't think it's worth it. I really think it's not that fun. There's some entertainment in just using the D4, getting a bad run, and actually trying to beat the rooms with it, but sometimes they're gonna roll into a very bad run, which is just not gonna really work out, and you're gonna take too much damage, and I think in some cases it's not really worth it. I also decided to go against it because I feel like I've done something very similar not too long ago, and I generally am not too prone on using the D4 to reroll my run multiple times, because I think it takes the skill out of the equation. I'm not really a big fan of that in some cases. Sure, sometimes it's fun to goof around and just use the D4 or maybe the D100 a few times, but in this particular case I decided to go against it, because after all, Lilith is supposed to be this unique character. I don't want to dumb her down too much by using yet another item which just trivializes the whole daily run as a whole. But besides that, you can see that at this point, our run is still really hasn't improved. We did get some items which kind of help us out on our journey. Serpent's Kiss, which also sadly doesn't really work with Mom's Knife, as I found out, which is a bit of a bummer. And Afterbirth Plus, if one thing kind of disappointed me, was that there is a very severe lack of synergies. I really feel like at some point Isaac becomes more about synergies than just getting individual items, because you're gonna find individual items. You're gonna get a breaking run, you're gonna get every single item in the game, and you're just gonna see them, or maybe you play a few Eden dailies or just runs, you're gonna see those new items appear. But something that's very not unique to the game, or maybe that you're not gonna see on every run, are synergies, or maybe fun synergies which you haven't seen before. So those are maybe with new items. Sure, you might find a new item and it's already novel enough, but you have that imagination in your head. What happens if I combine this new item with maybe Brimstone? Does something really cool happen? For example, the Eye of Belial, the Possessed Tears. I really thought that what was gonna happen, it just seems so natural, is that when Brimstone passes through an enemy, from that point on, it will start actually gain homing and actually deal more damage, and that would be a very fitting synergy, but it doesn't exist in the game, and when I got that combo, I was kind of disappointed in some regard. But I don't understand why they didn't do it, or at least they didn't do it as much as I would expect them to, and it was obviously because of the modding tools, and because they really didn't want to probably push this as a content patch. But I still feel like synergies are such a big part of the game. They are basically what gives the game its replay value. So when you find certain items that don't work together, like Serpent's Kiss with Mom's Knife, or maybe Mom with Lilith, or Mom's Eye with Lilith, it just becomes this weird combination of this weird run where you feel like you should be stronger at which point you are, but you're still just kind of playing the same run over and over again. Even though you have these unique items, there's really no way to utilize them. And for that reason, I also think that Azazel is kind of broken in some sense, because every run feels very samey, because you always rely on that short range Brimstone to kind of carry you through. But nevertheless, we did arrive at this point, and I think I picked one item. We had Curse of the Blind, so we didn't know what the items were in the dark room. I decided to pick up one in the secret room. I thought because the beggar died in the secret room, it's gonna be a secret room item pool from the secret room item pool, but that doesn't really happen. When the enemy dies or when you open a chest, first you get the treasure room pool. Only if you reroll it, I believe, then is it determined from the pool which you actually rerolled it into. So that means if we roll that particular item, then we would get one from the secret item pool. But in this particular case, we got Infestation 2, which is also a pretty good item to have just because of how it works. Sadly, we really weren't able to make good use of it, especially because we got it just before Mega Satan. And obviously, sure, Mega Satan does spawn some enemies to kind of go along with it, but we're gonna get something like 5 or 6 spiders at most, and especially with our damage, it's not gonna be too influential. Still, I guess I'm happy to have it because it's a good item in some regard. It's also one of those items that's just very good, but doesn't really have necessarily synergies with it. And I think some of those items exist, but also they're items which are good and have a lot of synergies and they don't synergize, and I think that's a bummer. So again, maybe I'm kind of reiterating myself, but I really want to try to maybe illustrate a picture of just how I feel the Afterbirth Plus has changed the content, and what's really funny, or maybe what's really great about it, even though we are at like 3 months, maybe a bit less, in it, I still feel like I'm developing new feelings for the game. Sometimes I feel like maybe it's a bit cheap, sometimes maybe I discover something new, and I still feel like we're at the stage where there are some things that we just don't really know yet. For example, I still feel like I haven't seen some of the items that are in Afterbirth Plus just because of the quantity of items, and I definitely feel like my feelings will mature or maybe develop over time, and I will arrive at some conclusion at some point. But at this point, I'm just kind of trying to let you know how I feel about the particular runs and just the game overall as we go through. With that said, we did finish in a very good spot on 53rd, and we did get a pretty high score regarding of, I mean, we didn't get a really high score, but we got a high score regarding, or at least relative to other people. 47,000 is not something you generally strive for on a Mega Satan Daily, especially not one which was as strong as this one, but I guess just the cumbersome usage of the Mom's Knife with Lilith, and just because there were a few nasty rooms, I didn't expect people to perform too well on this one, and also I didn't find any breaking synergies, although I'm sure that there were some, especially if you find the Purge rune along the way. If you go to the secret room, like I said, and actually blow that up, there's a good chance that you're gonna get something like Forget Me Now, and then you can use that, and that way maybe you can get an additional 1,000 or 2,000 points to go along with it. But still, in this case, we did turn out pretty well. 43 minutes is also pretty fast, at least for me, although my time rank isn't that good. Overall, I still really enjoyed this run. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.